Hello, my name is Janet Lee Sheriff. I'm the founder of Newfoundland.Gold, and I want to welcome everybody to our first virtual investor day focused on a emerging gold camp in Newfoundland. We have a great panel lined up today and great panels for the next few days. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to get right into everything and introduce our first speaker, which is Alex Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister from the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. But first, I want to thank everybody who's helped make this possible. In 30 days, we've put together a great lineup of 9 companies and an amazing team that's pulled this all together. So I thank them, and special thanks to Sean Ryan and Mike Collins of Exploits and Colin Cattell of Newfound Gold, who really helped pull this group together, and we couldn't have done it without them. Enjoy the conference, and remember, if you've registered for day 1, please also register for day 2 and day 3. You'll find some amazing keynote speakers, starting with Sean. And today, Denis Laboulaye, who really started it all with Newfound, and then wrapping it up with Rich Goldfarb. Again, welcome. And Alex, I'm handing it to you now, and I wish everybody great success and a great season.
Thank you, Janet, and to Newfoundland.Gold for the invitation to virtually welcome everybody to the province and to provide a brief overview and introduction to the jurisdiction. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Newfoundland and Labrador is, funnily enough, comprised of the island of Newfoundland and Labrador on the mainland. We have a population of about 500,000 people. The province's capital is St. John's, the most easterly city in North America. It has an international airport, typically serving 1.5 million passengers per year, with direct flights to Canada, the US, Europe, and beyond. We also have ice-free ports from which exports to and from the imports and exports to the province can be made. We have been successfully minimizing the impacts of COVID-19 in the province. Our vaccination rollout is going quite well. And additionally, in recognition of the importance of the mineral industry to the province, exemptions to the province's COVID-related special measure orders were provided to the mining industry, which includes the mineral exploration workers. Newfoundland and Labrador is a top-tier jurisdiction for mineral exploration and development. We're rich with world-class deposits of iron ore, nickel, and base metals, and as you all know, currently a red-hot jurisdiction for gold exploration. The province has a rich mineral endowment and a long history of mining dating back to the 16th century. Newfoundland and Labrador's geology is diverse, spanning almost 4 billion years. As a result, we have a wide variety of mineralizing styles and environments with a wide variety of commodities present. Our geological survey is responsible for public geoscience acquired through geophysical and geochemical surveys, mineral deposit studies, and systematic bedrock and superficial mapping. Resulting data from our geological survey and reports mapping are all publicly available on our website. We have recently created an independent geoscience technical advisory committee with appointments of members pending to provide recommendations to ensure our public geoscience meets industry's needs and requirements. Because the focus of this event is on gold, I'm showing only the island portion of the province here to demonstrate the level of the gold-related activities. Claims staked in 2020 are shown in orange here, representing 47,000 claims staked in 2020, which is the most in the province since 2007. So far this year, the claims staked in 2021, which are shown in red, is over 51,000 claims. So we've exceeded last year already. And in fact, in May alone, we had 32,000 claims staked. Things are really hopping, as you all know. We undertook airborne geophysical survey programs over the last few years in the southern portion of central Newfoundland, in the St. Albans Twillick Brook area. Yesterday's budget that was presented by the province includes additional funding for similar programs this year. Labrador is vastly underexplored and has potential for gold as well. One of the field programs for this year's geological survey includes work in western Labrador on iron oxide copper-gold potential in the area. Dr. Hamish Sandeman with our geological survey has a field program for central Newfoundland planned for this year, and Hamish is presenting later during this session. Newfoundland and Labrador is a mining-friendly jurisdiction. We were highly ranked at the most recent Fraser Institute survey with great improvement over last year, likely driven by the interest in gold in the province. We offer exploration incentives through our mineral incentive program, the Junior Exploration Assistance Program, and have a modern, transparent legislative framework. But we are looking to improve. As part of that, government, in partnership with industry, continues to advance our mineral strategy, Mining the Future 2030, and is implementing related actions as outlined in the strategy. So our mining and mineral development team here is a small team of dedicated professionals, passionate about the industry. And we are approachable. So feel free to reach out should we be able to be of assistance to any of you. Again, welcome to you all, and we look forward with work with you to advance the industry in the province. Next up is Michael McRae, who will introduce the panel for today. Thanks again. Cheers.
Alex, thank you very much. Yes, again, my name is Michael McRae, Mining Audience Manager at Kitco Mining. Kitco is your leading source for precious metal news. Welcome again to Newfoundland Gold's Virtual Investor Day. It's 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay win, and up next is our first panel. Under the next hour, we'll be running an interactive session with help from Michael Collins with Exploits Discovery, Blake Morgan with Opawika Explorations, Sean Ryan with Leocore Gold. The four of us will start off with some Q&A, but again, this is interactive. Please ask questions using virtual conference software, and I will pass on to our panel. Now, first up, I would like to invite our panelists onto the screen right now. Sean, I was going to get Michael to set us up, but maybe we could start with you first, and maybe you could talk about what is really exciting about Newfoundland and maybe just a bit about the geology, Sean.
Thank you. Yeah, Newfoundland is actually very unique. And once I started doing my research, like I'm coming from the Yukon, like the actual geological setting and the setup for this gold system is extremely unique. And same as the age of the timing. And that's what I talk about in my talk. So yeah, Newfoundland is like it's got all the key ingredients for a big district play here. And I think this is going to just keep going. The geology is set up perfect here.
Could you talk about that further, Sean? What is the geology? What are the trends? And just basically in the island, what are kind of the major regions?
Well, the gist of it is it was a big regional structural setup. And it was actually at a specific time, the Selenic and the Silurian time. And it was, so the uniqueness of the continents collided with each other. And then this gold pulse that actually happened at the same time with, or, you know, basically at the same event created a unique setting that you don't really see too many spots in the world. But, you know, Australia is very, very close. And that analogy to the Fosterville is, I agree with that.
Blake, I'd like to bring you in. What was your interest that was piqued in what was happening in Newfoundland?
Well, our flagship assets are on the Abitibi Greenstone Cadillac Larder Fault. So we modeled our move into the Newfoundland based on that structure. So that's sort of where we looked at where we wanted to get in and how we wanted to go about sort of thing. So we moved on to the Marathon Gold side. Obviously, Marathon Gold is creating some good numbers and some fantastic deposits. So that's sort of what brought us into the region, and we're following up on that model system. I know Raymond James just put out something in regards to the Abitibi and Newfoundland, and there's a few more reports coming out over the next few weeks. So you're going to see a bit more in that correlation between those two regions.
I like to describe, because I mean, Newfoundland really kind of arose, I would say. I've just kind of heard more and more of it. And then obviously with also the success of Denis Laviolette, and he'll be talking later, the success and the run up that Newfound.Gold has. But can we talk about how it suddenly came onto everybody's radar? I'll start with you, Sean.
Well, say again. I didn't quite catch that.
Maybe I'll start with you, Blake. Talk about first, and then Sean, you can grab it there as well too. Blake, yeah. How did the region come onto your radar?
So we heard about what Newfoundland.Gold was doing back when they were private, and that sort of got us into that region. And I think a lot of people were down that same route. Now, we started looking quite early. So it was last year, we started to make some moves. We worked closely with Michael Collins from Exploits as well. And obviously they picked up a really large land package. So that was the sort of fundamentals that brought us into that region. I know Opaweka itself started gaining ground next to where Sean was picking up ground, I think with C2C Gold. And that's sort of how we went into the region.
Sean, the question was again is how it became everybody's interest.
Well, I came to the island back in 2014 and started researching it before anybody showed up. And then in 2015, we actually launched an exploration program across the island, just taking regional soils to see if we could get a response. And like we could do it off of claims because there was nobody really jumping around in there too much. So we did our basically science and had a look at the data and realized, yeah, we could actually locate these basically anomalous structures. And then we jumped in 2016, led to the kind of a big stake-in rush, well, stake-in overnight. We crashed the server and the government server was down for 2 weeks. And then as soon as it popped back up again, that's when Newfound Gold tied on to us to the south. And that's kind of what launched this whole kind of start of looking at, you know, these gold systems in Newfoundland.
You talked about crashing the server, Sean. I'm just going to take this to Blake first. I mean, it's an area that is suddenly seeing a lot of interest. What is the type of support that you see in Newfoundland for the types of exploration work that you're doing, Blake?
Well, you've definitely got government support. It's a very mining-friendly jurisdiction. Tax breaks is fantastic. Crews is easy to find. So the more the area picks up and the more discoveries that are made, the more simple it's going to be for companies like ourselves. You know, you've got your standouts of Newfound Gold, obviously doing some fantastic stuff. You know, they got 8 drill rigs going, 100,000 meters. You got Marathon Gold, obviously just raised $50 million. They're doing some amazing stuff. So structure and infrastructure will pick up as deposits are made, discoveries are produced, and that's just going to basically help everyone in the region. And now you've got tax breaks with the government funding and stuff like that, which is going to be phenomenal. So when you're spending money on your exploration, you're getting a lot of it back, which is for small junior mining companies, that's fantastic. It just gives us more money to put into the ground, which creates more discoveries.
Sean, the question about support from the government and just the infrastructure for the work that you do.
In my mind, I'm always from the exploration side. Like the Geological Survey of Newfoundland is probably one of the best ones I've ever seen, and that's really, you know, that led me to basically be able to research from remote through this COVID time. And yeah, I can't say enough kudos for the Geological Survey. Like they have geophysicists on staff, they have geochemists on staff, they have, you know, structural geologists. Like the stuff they did over the last 30 years, it's actually what's launched and is helping us as an industry jump into this next gold rush. So it all starts with a good gold map or a good map, and that's what the survey is providing. And they've been providing this, you know, for the last over 100 years now. They've been as a survey. So yeah, no, we can't say good enough about these guys.
Sean, stakeholder relations in terms of the local communities and the support of what the exploration people are doing.
Well, like the first time I got there, my little story is when we were in Millertown, like we actually got a call within hours from the mayor looking for a job to get out in the bush. So people just do want to get out to work. They want us to find deposits, and they're like, you know, and they're the friendliest people on the planet. Yeah, like I can't like it. So it was the perfect storm and the perfect, you know, the Newfoundland as a whole. They export a bunch of miners out across the country. So they're miner types. So they would love for us to find a mine on the island so they don't have to leave the island to go to work. Yeah, no, it's kind of, so the whole setup from roads everywhere. We're used to using helicopters in the Yukon. There's roads to 70 to 75% of the ground here. Yeah, it's kind of so it's a different part of the world. But from an exploration, you know, we have all this rest of the stuff from the money side. The key was the Geological Survey that set the whole setup up, set the shots up. And now we're able to take that data from the surficial maps, to till maps, to geology maps, to these to the whole package, and take that and run with this now. So like to me, it was the setup, was the survey that started this.
I'd like to remind the people watching this is an interactive session. If you do have any questions for the panelists, please ask. Blake, could you talk about, just following up from Sean, just what it's like finding workers in the area and what the support is for doing exploration work, Blake?
Well, like Sean touched on, it's fantastic. The people in the region are fantastic. We've got a lot of mining companies moving in now, so there's a lot of jobs available, but it doesn't seem too difficult finding, the workers, because these people really want to get out on the ground. They're excited about the gold rush that's happening in the region. They're excited about what's going to produce in the future, and we're jumping on board with that. So, and like Sean mentioned, with the road infrastructure, you've got power. I'm used to doing a lot of programs up in the Golden Triangle where it absolutely costs you a fortune to fly around, and your drill programs are ridiculously priced. Whereas in Newfoundland, it's very, very cheap. You can drive to a lot of these spots. The small helicopter support you may need is very easy to get. Drill rigs don't seem like too much of an issue, even though there's a lot getting around at the moment. So it's set up quite nicely.
What's the seasons like? What's the weather up there?
It's quite good, actually. You can work all year round, but it just depends on where you are. So you've got some swampy area. We like to try and stay out of the sludge, but working through winter is not too much of an issue. But obviously, your summer, spring is fantastic to get out on the ground. Sean could tell you a bit more about that, definitely.
Sean, I know you know, if anybody knows about seasonality and weather, I think it would be you, Sean. So, but maybe you could compare what type of work you can do in the Newfoundland and when you can get some exploration out.
Yeah, and that's actually originally why I started researching there, was to actually get a shoulder season for the Yukon explorers up in the Yukon, because we really only get June to September to drill with the diamond drill. So we're caught with, the 30, 40 below. So Newfoundland, the irony here is we could soil right until December, like right until just before Christmas with a skip of snow, because we're not getting 30, 40 below. But you could drill all year round. And that's what's the difference here, the big difference from kind of working. Like I still love to work in the Yukon, but here we could actually work 12 months of the year, and the juniors could still get their news flow kind of continuously through the winter. So so I like it because now we could soil for 6 months out of the year. And that's what we're planning to do. And then we could still continue to rab drill through the winter, set it up for some nice diamond drill targets for the spring. So it's a nice, you're not rushed. And that's what I like. And what I could accomplish in 1 year in Newfoundland takes me about 2 to 3 years in the Yukon. So that's why we really like, it's the season, the nice big window to work with.
We talked about the infrastructure, but one piece on that, Sean, just what's the electricity grid and what is it like getting power in there?
Well, there's power almost, there's communities everywhere. So there's power everywhere. And they have these big grids cutting across the island. So that's why there's almost roads everywhere. The power is probably I don't know exactly the price, but I bet you they got to be competitive with Quebec, the ports. Anywhere you are within basically 125 clicks of anywhere on the island, you're within a port range. So the infrastructure is set up, and the people are and that's what I was getting at, that from a miner's point of view, that's where our population of miners are. So you could find a mine, but who's going to mine it? So you need these people.
And Sean, First Nation support is in Newfoundland.
Actually, it's interesting. I guess there is some First Nations, but it's not as prevalent as up in the Yukon, let's say, or other parts of Canada.
I see that Michael Collins is joining us. He was going to be our fourth panelist right now. I think he was having some internet issues. Michael, thank you for joining us. I'll let you get settled. It's glad to see you. I would like to remind the people watching us that this is an interactive session. So please submit your questions, and then I will be happy to take them to the panelists. There was this interest, Sean and Blake, in what was happening in Newfoundland. You've both come into, you've come on, you've come onto the province now. Could you talk about the major players in the area right now, who they are and what type of work they're doing?
Yeah, certainly. So, well, the standouts obviously for me are Newfound Gold and Marathon Gold. So we'll touch on Marathon slightly. You know, they're not spoken about much in compared to the new plays, you know, but they have a monster deposit. They've just raised $50 million and they'll be producing a mine over the next few years. So you've got them. Obviously, Newfound Gold is doing some fantastic stuff. They're pulling numbers basically not seen before. I think they've got 8 drill rigs going, 100,000 a meter drill program. So they're doing some fantastic stuff. Then you've got companies like Sockman, Labrador, and Exploits. Obviously, Exploits just had Newfound Gold invest into them. They've got Eric Sprott's come in twice. So they're doing some fantastic stuff, and they've got a major land package. Sockman, obviously, they've got some fantastic drill holes. They're currently drilling at the moment. I think they're doing about 50,000 meters. So I expect to see some good stuff coming out of them. Then you've got Labrador, for example. They just put out some drill results, and they're doing about a 50,000 meter program as well. They're fully funded, and they'll be doing some fantastic stuff. You've got Eric Sprott putting money into, you know, a lot of these companies in the region. Our company itself, you know, we're going to be oversubscribing our financing at $5 million. We put some news out today. So, you know, that's sort of where we're sitting. Sean's got some fantastic stuff. I'll let him go into a little bit more of it.
Thank you very much for the overview, Blake. I was trying to set the map there, and Blake, of course, did mention Marathon and Denny Laviolette and Colin Cattell's Newfoundland.Gold. Is there anybody else in that mix that should be mentioned, Sean?
Well, to me, the gist of the island is it's still brand new, and that's like, you know, from an exploration point of view. So to me, like, it's kind of interesting. Like, there's the juniors that are ahead of the pack right now because they've been there for a few years, but it's kind of, to me, almost everybody's equal. We're coming out. That's what's kind of cool about Newfoundland is, you know, all structure has a good probability. So from Cape Ray all the way to Bay Verde, this is what's so unique about the island. So we needed someone like Eric Sprott to basically grease the wheels from an exploration point of view. So this kind of reminds me of when Murray Pezin was financing the Hemlo discovery. You needed someone to back the exploration side. So Eric has jumped in, and that is fantastic for us. And now we just got to crack a couple of good codes on the exploration side, and which is potentially deeper soils, you know, and this kind of attack with geochemistry. And then we just hit it with, like, you know, that's why we're trying to bring rab drills. You know, Blake probably knows them from Australia, but we don't use it that much in Canada. So all of a sudden now we could get some cheaper exploration going in. And it's the cool part is like the whole island's just starting to come. It hasn't had a good exploration like this since 1988 to 89 when Noranda did the last big push. And so I think we're just picking up the torch where they left off. And basically with all this new data from the survey, like, this is just the beginning.
That was an interesting point, Sean. Sorry, I'll bring you in just a minute, Blake. Just a note to people that Michael Collins, unfortunately, he's having issues with his internet. He will not be able to join this panel, so we will be bringing him in on day 3, is what I've been told from the presenters. But just that was an interesting point that it was able to do cheaper drilling, and then you did make a reference to Blake, Sean, just with that RAB drilling.
Yeah, well, I wasn't actually going to touch on the RAB drilling. I was going to touch on, you know, the alliance itself. So, you know, it's not a competition in this region. The more discoveries that are made by all the players is better for the whole region. You know, the Gold Spot, you know, for an example, are doing some fantastic stuff with their AI technology, and they're looking at stuff. So they've got some fantastic data. Obviously, Newfound Gold's got some fantastic data. So the more that comes out, the better it is for everyone. And I suspect this year is going to be a really big year over in Newfoundland.
I will say that team's been. Sorry to interrupt you, Sean. I'll let you grab the point that Blake made, but I will just notice that you know, I've worked for a long time with the Yukon jurisdiction, and there seems to be a lot of that culture, especially with yourself, Sean. Also Janet, that came on the start. There's a lot of those people that kind of had that community or kind of that community focus, and they've kind of taken it over to Newfoundland. But go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, because we're on an island, high tide rises all boats. So if your neighbor hits, everybody's gaming. And that's what this is about. We're almost done our staking, like there's still some more going on. But the reality is once all the staking's done, we want our neighbors to be successful because everybody's winning. And that's that's what's kind of cool now. We're going to go into that phase of exploration where everybody's rooting everybody else on.
Yeah. You did, both of you did mention the importance of Eric Sprott coming in, and it seems to be an area that he's really been focused on. Eric Sprott, of course, being a famous financier and how would you say, deep-pocketed, and then he's really been able to advance and lift the profile of this region, Blake.
Yeah, certainly. You know, I think that's a key characteristic to the region. He doesn't throw money at crap. He knows what he's looking at, and that's why he's funding a lot of these companies. So, you know, when it comes to the region, that's something you want to look at. You know, what's Eric putting some money into? What's he looking at? And then go from there. You know, you obviously want to look at the players involved, the assets, their funding, those sort of things. But yeah, it's a big push with Eric getting involved, and I suspect some more major players to be getting into the area over the next few months.
I see some questions that have come in. Thank you very much. I'm going to be taking them to the panelists in a minute. I just want to follow up with some final questions. Sean, I think this would be a good question for you. And I think it was Chris Bannock that kind of touched on this, but I'm kind of proceeding what we're going to do here. But can you... and I think you did mention as well before, but could you talk about kind of parallels that you see in terms of what the geology is or what the exploration is, something that you would, our viewers might be familiar with, and how they could actually compare that to what's happening in Newfoundland?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of ones that, one reminds me of the Hemlo discovery, you know, at the beginning stages in Northern Ontario. And it's also a little bit like the Diamond Rush. And what I'm getting at is, right now, people are still sitting there going, is this real? Is this real? So you had their first movers come in and start picking up ground up there. But now with these better numbers that keep coming from Newfound Gold, it's starting to dawn on people. And it's kind of like when Hemlo, you know, after about a month or, 2 months, people started going back to the bush, staking further out and further out. And it's kind of like what happened with the diamonds. You had their first movers, and then once it solidified, people started moving up there even more. So I don't even think we've hit that phase yet, because we're actually strategically, staking ground that has structure and has these key components. We haven't gone into the blanket phase yet, which eventually hits basically these regional plays. So I think we're still at the, we still got a few more innings left in this to go, but I think it's just starting to dawn on people that Newfoundland might be a special place geologically here.
Blake, is there any types of parallels that you mentioned talking about Newfoundland when you say you're talking to somebody that is getting familiar with the area?
Yeah, so, our flagship assets are on the Labrador fault break system. So that's what we modeled ourselves on when we moved over to the Rogerson structure corridor. So that's the model we went. But like Sean was saying, you look at places like the Golden Triangle, many years ago, you could squeeze in there. Now there's no room. The Abitibi as well, the whole thing's staked out. And that's what we're seeing over in Newfoundland. Basically, in the next few months, people going to be staking the water. That's how hot the region is. So they're the sort of parallels we're looking at. And if you look at what's taking place in those regions, I suspect that's what we're going to sort of see in Newfoundland over the next few months, over the next year or two.
Blake, going to bring up this question because I think it just kind of segues into what you're talking about. But and I think also we should hear from Sean just talking about his own Leocore. But maybe firstly, you can tell me specifically about your company, Blake, Opawika. What are the what's your season looking like, and what's your plans?
Yeah, fantastic. So we just put out some news today. Obviously, we're going to be oversubscribed, $5 million. We're fully budgeted for a 10,000 meter drill program. So our flagship assets are actually in Quebec. So we have four assets in Quebec. Our two flagships are the Bazooka and the Arrowhead property. We have some phenomenal grades on the Bazooka property, similar to, well, not as sexy as Newfound Gold, but quite good. So we've got stuff like 5 meters over 90 grams, 1 meter over 315 grams, 5 meters over 45 grams. So we got some good numbers. So we plan to drill 5,000 meters on that property this year. It's contiguous to the Newfound.Gold property that was bought for $150 million last year, owned by Yamada. It's also contiguous to the Yorbo Resources property, which is optioned by Iron Gold. They're currently drilling 200 to 300 meters from our Bazooka shaft and hitting some fantastic numbers. So we're going to be hitting that property this year. Then also we've got the Arrowhead property. We plan on drilling 5,000 meters there. That's completely surrounded by Agnico Eagle. Agnico Eagle pulled about 900,000 ounces just off the border of our property in the last year. So we know there's gold in the region. We've got some great grades there, 90 grams over a meter. So that's sort of our focus. On top of that, we have 39,000 hectares in Newfoundland. So we've got about $1 million budget so far allocated for that, and we're going to be bringing them up to a drill-ready stage, in the next few months. We obviously put some news out to say we're going to be oversubscribed $5 million today, and we're going to be closing that this Friday. Once we get that things wrapped up, we're going to have a lot more information coming out. So that's me in a whole, but there's a lot of news I can't talk about just yet, but I will be shortly.
You did mention that piece with Agnico Eagle that was beside you. Could you just talk a little bit more about your neighbors and what they're up to, Blake?
Yeah, I certainly can. So Agnico, they've got the LaRonde mine, and they're looking for the LaRonde 2, basically. Then right next door to us, you've got Iron Gold, and they've got the West Haven mine. I think that's opened back up now. They had a seismic event there, I think, last year, which shut them down for a little bit. So the whole region's hot. We've got mills all the way down on the fault system. We've got major players completely surrounding us. Agnico is drilling completely around our border at the moment, seeing what's around. So it holds well for what we possibly have on our assets.
Sean, Leocor, what have you got planned there?
Leocor's got an advanced project in the Bay Verde area, so we're planning to basically just go and polish that up with maybe some trenching and probing, but then get ready to RAB drill that probably by August, I'm assuming. And the rest of the projects that we picked up, they're basically based on these regional structural patterns that we could see from the mag and geology with some till. And we're basically going to hit that with probably roughly around 25,000 soils and start systematically mowing down these structures with these big regionals. And then if the magic has it, that should actually turn out some nice targets. And then we'll follow that up. Probably what's nice is we could follow that up right up until December with more soils, tightening up the grids, and then get ready to hit that with RAB drilling in the spring of 2022 with the potential diamond drilling by that summer. So it's kind of a systematic exploration approach. But you know what the cool part about this is? 90% of this ground has never been looked at. This is what's remarkable. And a lot of these things are on the roads. So it's I think Newfoundland is poised to take off here. And that's what we're going to do is mow it down with these big geochemical programs.
Sean, that was going to be my last question of the panel before I bring up some of the interactive questions. I will again remind our viewers, please submit your questions for Blake and Sean, and I'll be happy to pass them on. But, I've listened to this presentation, Sean. My interest is piqued. Can you talk about maybe what are some of the milestones, beyond Leocor, but what are some of the milestones overall that somebody should look ahead and also, how they should possibly put a model together in terms of assessing and what they might want to invest in Newfoundland?
Well, it's going to be interesting because we're at the beginning stages, like between most of the projects that I staked this winter from fall to winter. We're planning to do roughly that's what Sassy, Leocor, and C2C. We're planning to do about we're in close to 100,000 soils. So the idea is that we're going to mow this district down on the structures. We're not wildcatting, kind of like Yukon was a shotgun approach. This is more targeted, and that's what I like from an exploration. It's purely structure that we're chasing down, trying to figure out what parts of these structures are anomalous. But what's going to develop here is there's going to be. This is what happened in 88 and 89 to Noranda. They made so many discoveries, and that was based on the Lakeside survey that got put out. There was a big map put out at once, and then everybody jumped on it. In a 1.5 year window, they made so many discoveries, they actually couldn't process them. And this is hence why they would drill a hole, basically hit 2 meters of half an ounce material and then keep moving because it was good but not good enough because they had 40 other targets in their sights. And then when the super flow through crashed in 89, that shut the tap off. And actually Noranda had a new president change by 90, laid pretty well everybody off. And the world hasn't took off since then. So, and they were basing part of this on geochemistry. So now we're going to hit the island, and I expect us to start seeing flashes everywhere. And that's kind of what happened when we hit the Yukon hard, in the Klondike Gold District. We only had a few gold showings. After 3 or 4 years of this intense geochemistry, there's probably 40 or 50 of them that were discovered and a few deposits. So that's kind of what I see this pathway here going forward. So it's going to be, so some of the companies like Leocore, they have a big land package. That's the idea. It was, Newfoundland, it's cheap to stake. They're like fishermen. They bait their hooks easy. You bite on it. You pay basically the staking cost and the down payment, and then you're hooked. But you got to do work every year. And so that's what, it's a double-edged sword. So you got to, you can't sit on a piece of real estate for 10 years because it's costing you money all the time. So the idea is to hit it hard, figure out your district, and then kind of get your targets honed in by year 3. And that's kind of the overall goal. But this is a rare opportunity. Like I never imagined I could find a place like this. It's in Canada. This could be a third world country that just opened up for the first time here. So that's what's unique about Newfoundland here.
I'm going to be asking Blake the same question in just a minute. That was terrific, Sean. I have to ask, because you did bring it up as well too. What is it like kind of getting drill results out of the lab these days?
Well, the lab might be a little bit slower, but how's this from a soil point of view? We've actually set it up that we could get a prep lab that we basically set up with the Eastern Analytical guys, and we could get a 25-day turnaround from our soil program. So we've designed it so that we could actually go in, get some data, go back to move to another project, and we can move around the project systematically and get data coming back within a month turnaround. So this is what I love about from a geochemical program. We should be able to go in and out of these programs 3 or 4 times over the next 6 months, following up on good data. So it's the labs now from the drilling side, that might be a little bit more slower like it normally is, but from the soil point of view, we've speeded this up.
Blake, somebody comes up to you at the next show when we're, when we can see each other physically at whichever mining show you mentioned as well too. They're interested in the space. How would you tell them to actually kind of model opportunities in Newfoundland? And maybe if you could talk about what you see some of the major milestones as jurisdictionally coming up.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like Sean said, it's not always about who was in first, because the area has got so much exploration potential. But I look at certain things like funding. Yeah, obviously you want to make sure the company is going to be able to fund itself. There's no point investing in something that's going to sit there and do nothing for 10 years. Then you go into the assets. You want to make sure they've got some quality assets. But again, it's hard in this region because it's very underexplored. Some of the best things we're going to probably find is stuff with no showings on it. We're not sure of what's there. So I think a lot will come out over the next 6 to 12 months on where to look and how to go about it. I think the Sprott investment, is a bit of a key. Sprott's throwing money into a company. Well, that's something to certainly look at. I like the work Goldspot's doing over there. I like the technology they're using. I like the way they're going about it. So, I think people that are looking at Goldspot and using them, I think that's something you want to look at. Obviously, the team, when you got superstars like Sean Ryan or Michael Collins, who are, great geologists on your team, that sort of mitigates a lot of risk. So, they're the sort of things you want to look for when you're looking to get into the region, I would suspect. But there's a lot of opportunity. That's for sure. There is a lot of opportunity.
You did mention it, so it was Goldspot, and that's Denny Laviolette's. That's using AI and then using modeling. So is that a potential way in terms of kind of getting exposure to Newfoundland, just given what their business model is, Blake? I'm sorry, this might not be a fair question. It's more a question for Denny, but
yeah, I'll give you I won't go into it too much, but I think the short answer is yes. Goldspot have a lot of data in the region. They're working with a lot of companies, so they know a lot more than a lot of other people. So the way they go about it is they basically grab all the data and they go through it and they work out the patterns and they work out what's going in the region. So I think, yes, it does hold a bit of weight.
Okay, I'm going to go to your questions right now, and I'm going to throw this to you, Blake. I'm going to phrase it this way. This was from Alessandro, and then they're just asking about projections for the price of gold. But how about if we put it this way? What was your interest in this particular space, and what was the interest in terms of focusing on the commodity?
Well, we've been in the gold sector for some time now. So what my group likes to do is basically when a commodity is not doing the best is the best time to enter that region. So obviously gold's hot at the moment, so gold properties are very valuable at this time. So if you can get in early, that's the best time. Obviously, gold price, well, I think that's pretty straightforward in a certain way. Basically, the world's printing a bunch of money, economies are down, inflation's going to go through the roof, and gold price is going to soar. That's the way we see it. We think, over the next few months, we're going to see it go over $2,000 and it's going to maintain that. So that's sort of the route we're thinking.
I have a question here from Chris Bannock. Sean, I'm going to throw it to you. They were asking, how would you compare Newfoundland Gold's and Newfoundland Gold, of course, Denny Laviolette and Colin Cattell's company that we've been mentioning. How would you compare their discovery to Great Bear Resources in Red Lake area?
Actually, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I've watched the Great Bear talk. But Newfound Gold's discovery is very, very unique. It's different. If they're comparing it to the Swan discovery, like in Fosterville, I agree with all the data that's pointing this. So that's very different. It's very unique. And the Swan is kind of like it's the ultimate, we're on an island, pirate's chest, like what's full of gold. It's very small, like it's only about 100 meters by 100 meters, but it may have up to 3 million ounces in it. So it's super rich. So that's a very unique setting. Now, I would normally not look for that as an exploration because you might as well go looking for diamond pipes. It's about as rare. But they've actually stumbled across something like this that looks a lot like this near surface on Newfound Gold's discovery, on the Keats stuff. So what that's going to do from an exploration point of view is if these guys keep banging some good holes out of there and build some ounces, that's going to drive the confidence. Marathon coming out with their basically, kissing over 4 million ounces. But it's a little bit lower grade. And this is high grade and it's unique. And if it's like the Swan, that's going to give the confidence to the market that they're going to go hunting for this for the next 10 years. And the big thing that we have to realize, and this is what, from my research, 80% of the gold discoveries on the island right now were from the Noranda days, 88 to 89. There was another 15% found in 2002 to 4. And then the last 5% was in the last few years. So the point is, this island is prime. And if we have these basically Keats showings or Swan type deposits sitting out there, this is going to drive the market. And now we got Eric here. So what I'm hoping is the science drives this to new discoveries. And then this thing should just keep going for the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that's a terrific place to wrap it up. I want to thank Sean Ryan with Leocor, and then I also want to thank Blake Morgan with Opawika. Thank you very much, panelists, for helping us out.
Thank you very much.
My name is Michael McCrae, Mining Audiences Manager at Kitco Mining. Kitco is your leading source for precious metal news. I want to thank the organizers for letting us participate. You are watching Newfoundland Gold's Virtual Investor Day. Up next is going to be Dr. Hamish Sandeman. He's the project geologist for the government of Newfoundland and Labrador. And we'll also be hearing from, and we've mentioned his name, Denny Laviolette, and he is with Newfoundland Gold. Once again, thank you very much for participating and watching this panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hamish Sandeman, and I work for the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Geological Survey of Newfoundland and Labrador. And today I'm going to be talking about the geotectonic architecture, structural setting and timing of gold mineralization in the central Newfoundland Appalachians. Thank you for attending today, the Newfound Gold June 1st to June 3rd virtual symposium. Really appreciate it. So now I'll just move into my talk. First of all, I'd just like to point out here that this is a view looking south from the Window Glass Hill deposit at Cape Ray. And that's a beautiful shot of a helicopter in the distance, a drill rig drilling the Window Glass Hill deposit, a student assistant, David Drover, my colleague James Conliffe, and Charles Gilman of Matador Mining. So today I'm going to discuss a summary and overview of the lithotectonic elements of the Newfoundland Appalachians, the bounding structures of the different terrains, the geophysical features of mainly the central region and the terrain elements therein. I'm going to quickly go through the geotectonic evolution of the area, simplified, overview of the magmatism and volcanism during the key gold events, geochronological constraints on gold mineralization and their host rocks, and I'll finish off with a few takeaway points. So for many of you, you may not realize, but Newfoundland, it's had a very long history of mining, in particular VMS-associated mineralization, copper and lead zinc. But gold has really been a pretty minimal byproduct, mainly prior to 1986, 1987. Before 87, there were really very few recognized gold deposits or showings, whatever you'd like to call them, on the island, with about 10 poorly documented occurrences. And this really existed from the turn of the century until about 1987. And it was only until the whole flow-through share structure in the late 1980s, market conditions and the price of metals initiated the discovery of many new showings in Newfoundland and Labrador. And in fact, many of the ones that are under investigation today were discovered at that time. And of course, many, but not all of those discoveries were largely attributed to a large land position and money expenditure by Noranda Exploration back in those days. So back in 1935, this is really the first documented map of gold areas in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Snellgrove, A.K. Snellgrove, 1935. The dots are areas that he investigated himself. There are some triangles here and there, especially notice they're all along the coast. Those are other reported gold areas. So in total, there's about 10, give or take a few others, with little known about them. The oldest one, of course, is from the Sops Arm area here, and it was called the Browning Mine, which operated very briefly at about the turn of the century to 1930s, and maybe 100 ounces were mined from that. In 1962, Johnston reported on gold mineralized zones in Newfoundland, and if you look at the gold-only things that he reports on, there's still essentially only 10 gold-only related mineralized zones in Newfoundland and Labrador. On the right in red, I've put the more modern names for some of these showings. So you can see Sops Arm, the first one I mentioned, Browning Mine. Hope Brook is Chetwynd. That's the only actual mine, gold-only mine that operated before 1990 in Newfoundland and Labrador. And a few other places here. You can see one of them is a VMS deposit. There's always been a focus on VMS in Western Newfoundland in particular. In 1988, of course, after the 86, 87 sort of work done by BHP Billiton, in particular on the south coast at the Sank Surf, Hope Brook, Chetwynd deposits, John Tuack and others put out a report, and this was work from a few years, that documented many more new gold occurrences in Newfoundland. Some of them, in particular, Hope Brook and Chetwynd down here on the south coast, are associated with significantly Ordovician or older rocks, essentially, Precambrian rocks of the Avalon zone, and there are a number of other gold showings on the Avalon Peninsula I'll show you briefly later, but I'm not going to discuss about those more. So essentially, central Newfoundland and western Newfoundland, there were most of the gold associated mineralization was recognized on the Bayvert Peninsula and also in the Sopsarum area, plus some in central Newfoundland. And for today, you really just need to go and spend some time on our GeoAtlas to look at many of these auriferous zones. But the point to take away from all this is that there's really, although there's been some discovered since that late 1980s, early 1990s rush, there's been really relatively few new discoveries, and very few have been sufficiently explored. And this is just for your interest, a slab shot of the Jacqueline main vein at the Golden Promise Prospect or Jacqueline Prospect, and beautiful quartz textures there. Okay, so just an overview of the simplified geology of the island. We have a number of tectonic zones defined by Hank Williams and co-workers in the 80s. And that's the Humber Zone, the Dunnage Zone, divided into Western Notre Dame subzone and Eastern Exploits subzone, the Gander Zone, and the Avalon Zone. Those are the four main lithostratigraphic or lithotectonic zones on the island. And they are, of course, bounded by these large-scale faults labeled here: the Deucers Valley Fault System, the Cabot Fault System, the Bayvert-Brompton Line, the Red Indian Line, the Dog Bay Line, the Grub Line, and the Dover Fault. And I'll be discussing those again briefly here now. The important thing is, for gold mineralization, are these rocks in sort of this horrible faded pink and orange color, because these are the Siluro-Devonian rocks that are common in Newfoundland. Now I'm going to zoom in here now on this area here in red, which is a geophysical image of that area with the same faults plus a few other more added. And this is really where I've been focusing my own investigations. So here you can see the geophysical compiled image, thank you Jerry Kilfoyle, of our survey, which shows in the upper left-hand corner the Deucers Valley Fault System, the Cabot Fault System, the Laurentian Margin, which equates with the Humber Zone, the Dashwoods Ribbon, or the Notre Dame subzone, bounded to the south by this red line here. And then in the east, we have the Dover Fault System with red line here. And all of these fault zones indicated in between are the same as the ones I've shown: the Gander River Complex, the Dog Bay Line. I've also added the Reach Fault here, which I think is a very important structure. The Noel Pauls Line, or Valentine Lake Shear Zone, which may be the southeastward continuation of the Dog Bay Line. And the Exploit subzone here, which is cut linearly by the Northern Arm Fault, which we know its latest movement is dextral, and the same for the Reach Fault here. On this diagram, I've also shown some of the main convergence directions between these different terrains or large chunks of pre-existing material, including the S here, which is a Selenic convergence direction that refers to late Silurian convergence, and the Acadian convergence direction here in A, and which is Devonian to mid-Devonian, and then finally the Neo-Acadian convergence direction, which is about 385 to 350, maybe, poorly defined. So there are some of the major structures, and they're all labeled. In terms of what we're looking at here, I've put this up. This is from Van Staal et al. 2014. It emphasizes in the red block here all of the Siluro-Devonian deformation events, the thrust directions inferred from those events. And the point I make over here is that in the earliest Silurian, all are southeast directed thrust faults. These are important things to take into account in your areas. And in the Acadian event or the Devonian event, these are mainly northwest directed thrusts. Okay, this is a lot of words summarized, and I don't want to spend too much time on the stuff in black. What I really want to emphasize is the stuff in red, which is the closure of the exploits back arc basin during the Selenic or the Silurian event from 443 to 423, the closure of the Acadian Seaway, and then the closure of the Rheic Ocean. And the key points here is that there are promontories and reentrants along the margin, and that all involve transcurrent deformation. This is again from Van Staal and Barr 2012. I've circled these area here. These just show the thrust directions, and these are early events back in the Ordovician and the Cambrian. They don't play much of a role in the Silurian and Devonian orogenic gold events. And this emphasizes, again, these thrust structures in an early event that is not of importance to the gold mineralization in Newfoundland and Labrador. The key events are in the early Silurian here, we call the Selenic, and the Acadian event. So we have southeast directed thrusting at this time, and we have northwest directed thrusting at this time. These are key events in the evolution of the Newfoundland Appalachians. And finally, this is an event which may or may not be important, but it is later at 390 to 350 Carboniferous deformation associated with docking of Maguma. The intrusive rocks may play an important role in the gold story in Newfoundland and Labrador. And this map here from Van Staal, 2009, I believe, shows the plutonic rocks in various colors across the Newfoundland Appalachians and other parts of the Canadian Appalachians. And basically what it shows is that the plutons range from oldest to the northwest to youngest in the southeast. And they range from late Silurian through to mid-Devonian. And this implies, and they also occur sporadically, episodically through that whole event. So this implies that magmatism occurs essentially at the same time as orogenesis, deformation, and perhaps the formation of gold deposits. So how do we constrain the age of gold deposits? Well, it may be suggested by correlation with other gold mineralizing events, or by the host rocks and the mineralizing events within those host rocks. It may also be indicated through fossils or geochronology of the host stratigraphy. So that would provide us with a maximum age on the mineralization. We can also, much less easily done, however, directly date the age of mineralization. And in order to do that, we need to use certain systems like uranium-lead geochronology, argon-argon geochronology, or rhenium-osmium geochronology. But these different methods are all dependent upon the types of minerals that the host mineral, the gold mineralization contains. This slide essentially summarizes all known geochronological information, both on intrusive rocks, extrusive rocks, as well as paleontological information on whatever rocks we have in central Newfoundland mainly. It extends from the west, from some of the deposits on the Beaver Peninsula, to the east, to some of the deposits just east of the Dog Bay line. And this is a summary of all previous information. You can see the key here, the different styles of or methods which were used to determine the age of the mineralization. And these describe the rock types. There's a lot of information here, but what you can see is that down here, the black shales that many of you may be seeing in your exploration packages are roughly all the same age across the entirety of central Newfoundland, ranging from about 455 MA to about 445 MA. The really key thing here is that all of the Silurian volcanic and sedimentary rocks and intrusive rocks vary from west to from about 435 to east to about 408. And outlined here, I have the Fogo batholith, the Mount Peyton batholith, the intrusions in Dog Bay, and the Hodges Hill batholith here. Also on this diagram, I've presented information of our best estimates on the right-hand side of the age of orogenesis in central Newfoundland. And these are based on Van Stalenbaer 2012 and a number of other papers, and give the best age estimates for these ranges. I've also added this interorogenic extension event, which is based largely on the work of a colleague, Ian Hansberger, who has a paper in review right now. A lot of these ages in here are his, and there's a clear period between what we call the Selenic orogenic event here in the Silurian and the Acadian orogenic event in pink here in the Devonian. There's a period of extension, and that plays a huge role for gold mineralization in Newfoundland. Here's what we know in terms of spatial information for gold mineralization. There's way too much to get into, but largely the majority of ones in the western area here are either Silurian, late Silurian in age, such as those in Anaconda Mining mine plan, or the old Richmont mine here, Nugget Pond. They're late Silurian, or they range down to, for instance, data in publication stage, Leprechaun Pond, i.e. Valentine Lake, 410, Antler, just a long strike from there, about 410. And there's a number of ages here, about 4.6, 4.10 MA. This seems to be a very important age in the Newfoundland Appalachians for gold mineralization. And even younger than that as well, as you can see up here in the Sops Arm area, everything ranging from about 415 down to 380 MA. Okay, and here's a graphical summary of the same information, emphasizing the same orogenic events. This is in a slightly older slide. There's a period of extension in here. We know that right now, that overlaps some of this mineralization. But again, these are displayed in terms of zones or areas. But you can also see from this slide that there's something significant happening at about 380 in both the Humber zone, the Notre Dame subzone, and the Exploit subzone. And you also see a wide range of mineralization occurring in the late Silurian to early Devonian in central Newfoundland here, including Stoggertite, Valentine Lake, Pine Cove, the granitophile mineralization at the slip showing. There's many more there that I don't have time to discuss. So just to finish off some major key points, most of the mineralization, gold that is, or precious metal, is late Silurian to early Devonian. It's associated with Selenic to Acadian, so that's Siluro, late Silurian, right the way through to middle Devonian, deformation and orogenesis. Most of the deposits occur near major fault zones and splays, and most of these faults must be reutilized through time. Deformation is associated with transpression, both sinistral and dextral. As I mentioned, these orogenic events occur in rapid succession, but they are separated by a 6 to 8 million year period of extension and deposition of the Siluro-Devonian volcano-sedimentary basins. These basins were then inverted and closed. And again, there's a whole bunch of things here on this, which most people probably know. Mineralization requires vein style, commonly, which requires brittle ductile conditions and you need to make space. And that can only happen during faulting and tectonic adjustments and earthquakes. So that's orogenesis and thickening, and competency between different units. Immediate differences in competency contrast is important. Is preceded and succeeded by the intrusive and extrusive activity that I mentioned. And the entire Appalachians west of the Dover Fault have been affected by these events. I'd also point out that the Avalonian craton must also have been affected by Acadian and Neo-Acadian events. And finally, these are not just simple orogenic gold systems and member systems. They all have different characteristics: host rocks, alteration phases, etc. And my final posed question might be to ask, is there more mineralization that we know of in the Gander zone and perhaps the Humber zone? I'd like to thank all of my fabulous assistants throughout the years. They were wonderful and very helpful. And to finish off, here's a slide of salient references, and more available upon request. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me speak here today, and welcome everybody to the Newfoundland.Gold Virtual Investor Day conferences. And so it's really a pleasure and honor to be kicking this thing off with a keynote speech for everyone about a little bit about our company, Newfound Gold, and a bit of our story, as well as to talk to just what's been so absolutely exciting and thrilling to be a part of, which is a discovery boom in Newfoundland. So a bit about Newfoundland. Gold has been being explored for here in Newfoundland for quite some time, well over a century, both being mined and explored for. But for the last century, for the most part, companies were precluded from really exploring from gold. There was a concession-based system, and I'll try to summarize this quickly. But the concession-based system ended up with a lot of companies having, or a very few, number of companies having very large land packages. And then in came this Mineral Impost Act in the early 90s, which started to force these very large companies to shed ground and spend exploration monies on their ground. And again, this in the Canadian landscape, another important thing happened around that time too, which was flow through. So we started seeing small companies actually explore, and speculative investment from retail fly into mining discovery plays. Before that, a lot of discoveries were made by major companies. And so you kind of had both of these things happening to Newfoundland, and it was really immature in terms of its prospecting community and all that sort of thing. So you had a bit of an explosion of prospecting, which was quite niche around in the latter part of the 90s. And then heading into the last cycle, I hate to say, there was a big misnomer about Newfoundland, which was that discoveries, or gold particularly in the province, was small, potty, difficult to stitch together. And this is sort of a plague of the Maritimes, I think, in general, but really founded off of little scientific basis. It's really one was just because, well, of course, if you're looking in an area that is metalliferous and endowed with metal content, whether it be gold or anything, the first thing you're going to find is small smoky bits before you find the big deposits. And so it should be really encouraging that there's a lot of smaller potty types of things there. That should make you believe that there's quite a bit of gold-bearing fluid being injected in the system, and there might be a mother lode in there somewhere. And so we were sort of a bit contrarian with our approach when looking at the Maritimes. Based on the trends we saw in the last cycle, Colin and I both agreed over a beer that the best place, the best types of assets to go after were really tier one jurisdiction, district scale plays. And so if you look at some of the other tier one jurisdictions in North America, there wasn't really, there was a lot of claim saturation and project saturation. There wasn't a lot of opportunity the way there was here in Newfoundland. Now, there's a few other things that made Newfoundland compelling. It has a tremendous workforce that works abroad, very skilled labor, relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things. Environmentally speaking, they're very pro-business and pro pro-job. So it's a great place and should be an amenable place to secure permits, etc. But moreover, geologically, there was just this tremendous opportunity to stitch together what we thought was really compelling and really meaningful. So I'll just skip to a couple of slides here for everyone's benefit. If you can stick with me, we've got a little bit about the genesis of this area. So this is actually a map that shows the continental collision margin between the African plate and the North American plate. Once upon a time, there was an ocean here called the Iapetus Ocean, and it was closed up because continents move and they collide. And we can trace this collision front from Ireland all the way across the ocean, down through the Maritimes, and off the coast in Maine, and back on land again in the Carolinas in the United States. And so this is what we call a suture zone. It's a very deep-seated plumbing system that allowed for gold-bearing fluids to come up from the deep crust and from the mantle and migrate their way up into cracks and crevices and spaces to crystallize in the form of quartz veins and sometimes other deposit styles, but to form basically gold-bearing deposits. And so one of the big insights that we had when we looked at this was that the Dog Bay line, which was identified as the proper collision front, was in fact pretty much completely wide open when we came to Newfoundland. It also happened to be the largest cluster of prolific gold showings in the province, which we thought was really, really also compelling. Some notable discoveries made along this geological feature in the last cycle were Dalradian Gold, which is their deposit in Ireland, 6 million ounces and growing. We have Marathon Gold, which is 4 million ounces and growing, and Oceana Gold in and around the same in North Carolina. These were pretty big discoveries made in the last cycle, and so we're starting to see some geological attention fly into this macro picture. Now let's look at it a little bit from the side here. So I want to point everyone's attention to this diagram over here on the right. When you have two plates colliding, you end up with this crinkle effect. So you end up with like imagine two cars crashing together. The hoods of the cars would crinkle up like an accordion. The same happens with rocks when they're crashing together, or pieces of crust. And what ends up happening is you get these big failures, these big breaks. And so we've got a couple of these low displacement accommodation faults that have come in, and we call them the Appleton fault zone and the JBP fault zone. And it's up these primary pipelines that the gold-bearing fluids came from very deep and migrated their way up close to surface in placing gold. And so that's really what we were after. This was the theory that underpinned our attraction with the area. Now, just to speak to a bit of the landscape, one of the things that makes Newfoundland challenging, and one of the reasons why there's so much opportunity today, is that a lot of the province is covered with very thin glacial till cover. This is a thin layer of gravel that hides everything. There's very few outcrops in the central part of the island, even grading towards the coast. Newfoundland has a lot of hidden gems. And so one of the things that was attractive about us was in some of this gravel, we were getting tremendous amounts of gold and floats of quartz with visible gold in them. And that's some of the stuff that attracted us to the area. Also in the 90s, a company called Noranda had done a lot of regional exploration. They had huge swaths of ground, and they were trying to distill it down into the nuts and bolts of what they were going to keep. And luckily for us, this area happened to be one of the places they looked, and they found some really spectacular gold in both historic drilling, very reconnaissance level drilling, as well as trenching and float sampling, etc. And so just enough to sort of get our beaks wet and get us convinced that there's something much bigger here. Stitching this land package together, Newfoundland has a great online staking platform. It's been overhauled in the last couple of years. But you know, when we came in, it was online and it was really easy to do. And we could look at large scale geology and have a look at who the different land tenure holders were and how we were going to basically plan for our staking missions. One of the big undertakings we had to do is we had to stitch together this northern patchwork. And if everyone can see my cursor up in the northern portion of our project, you'll see a lot of different shapes and sizes in terms of claims that agglomerate to our larger claim package. And that's because we had about 16 different local prospectors that had dribs and drabs. Prospectors the likes of Alan Keats and his son Kevin and Peter Dimmel, who've been working with us to advance this through. And they've been there basically since its original discovery in the Noranda days. Once we kind of had the tiger by the tail and we had locked up the historic advanced work on the northern portion, we set our sights on the southern portion. And Sean Ryan, who I believe will be doing some address here in the coming days, also had staked our northern boundary almost to the coast. And this was really shocking to us because we were slowly pecking away at putting this all together and doing some staking and doing some work. And in comes Sean Ryan in the middle of the night, taking our northern boundary to the coast, which of course made it easier for me to justify explaining to our team that we wanted to be snapping up the rest of this belt before we could potentially lose it. So we ended up grabbing a absolutely tremendous land package. And we spent the better part of several years sharpening our axe. We were doing geophysical work, tremendous geophysical work, really modern type stuff, as well as geochemical works to advance our targets and give us some confidence in putting all this together and finding more. One of the big comparisons that we were making at the time, and we still do, of course, is with the Bendigo Gold Belt in Australia. This is the exact same type of gold belt that we're exploring here in central Newfoundland. So the rocks are exactly the same age. They're the same types of rocks, sandstone, siltstones, and shales. And we have a lot of the same structural environment. These two belts were formed the same way. The mining history are very different, however. In Victoria Goldfields, since 1850s, it's produced over 22 million ounces of high-grade gold and some low-grade as well. But the beauty of that is that would be akin to, say, in Canada, what we see in Red Lake, which is a very prolific and area that we're all very confident in being a kind of a namesake and staple in the Canadian mining landscape. And here we have an analogous belt to what we see in Victoria Goldfields in Newfoundland, really in its infancy. So I'll switch to a couple of images specifically on our project that get us really excited. Let me just jump to some of this here. So here we have some of the historic workings from Noranda as well as a lot of our work, and we've been able to find a few very compelling zones. The number one zone, the first one we checked, was really the Keats zone. Like everything else on this project, what got us excited about this zone was really just there was a lot of smoke. That's what got us here. That's what got us excited. When we first landed in Newfoundland to have a look at these rocks, to come and see this area, we saw hand sample after hand sample of beautiful specimen type visible gold. And to me, you couldn't have, as a geologist, you couldn't have an area with such widespread high-grade visible gold without having something substantial beneath your feet. There's a really good shot that there's an elephant in here somewhere. And so really that was what we set out to find. And that's what led us here. And so now what we've been doing is we've been exploring. The very first place we checked was Keats. We drilled underneath a bunch of historic reconnaissance Noranda holes, which were pretty low grade and really nothing to write home about other than that they were very widespread low grade mineralization. And bang, eureka, under all of that smoke, there was this roaring fire. And today it's one of the most interesting, and I think it may be one of the most significant discoveries made in the Canadian landscape, if not the global landscape, for a very long time. The average width of mineralization that we've got so far out of our mineralized composites through the drilling has been in excess of 14 meters, and the average grade in excess of 25. Now that number may be a little dated since the last time we checked it, but that's really, we're onto something very, very serious and substantial. And it's helpful to notice that when we talk about all of this mineralization at Newfound Gold, specifically at the Keats zone, is it hangs together quite well. We've got a good handle on where it's going. We've got some pretty fascinating and tremendous results. And we know, and so far it just keeps going and going and going and going. And so we're pretty thrilled to continue to explore it. We also were lucky enough on our northern part of our project to find this Lotto zone. I mean, one of many zones we think will help hopefully lead to a culmination of zones that would be a very tremendous discovery. But here at Lotto, we've got some really compelling high grade. And we're super excited to continue to explore that and find more Keatses and find more Lottos after all. I'll show you a little bit about what this looks like. This is a zoom out of the Appleton North project. One question I get about Newfoundland is, often continuity. We talk about grade and nugget. We talk about also the fact that, there really isn't a lot of exploration historically done in this area. And Newfound Gold has this massive land package. But, the reality is that the magnitude of this land package is really lost on a lot of people. A lot of questions about our market cap, $1.4 billion. How could a company with such a discovery and so early in its life cycle have such a high valuation? And the reality is that we have on this map 7.8 kilometers of high-grade superficial gold along the Appleton Fault Zone. The Keats is really just a pinprick. This is what everybody's been getting excited about, as well as Lotto. There's going to be several others, we think. We don't know this for sure, but it's almost impossible to have such a prolific, big footprint of high-grade superficial gold without having other zones like Keats elsewhere within this 7.8 kilometer stretch. Similarly, we have high-grade spattered across 12.4 kilometers, only 5 kilometers east along the JBP fault zone. So this is something else that we think, somewhere in here, there's probably some Keatses. We just don't know exactly where. We've done a lot of homework to try to figure that out. And we feel confident with the current drill program that we're going to bite into at least a few of them. Just to kind of broaden the perspective about our valuation and the company, that what I've just shown you, this 7.8 kilometers, is really limited to this little part up here on the northern portion of our land package, as well as that 12.4 kilometers on JBP along the northern portion. We have both of these things mineralized at surface with soil anomalies, float sampled gold, etc., showings for 70 kilometers each to the south. Very, very big systems. We're not looking for one mine. We're looking for multiple mines. This is a project, a property package, a district that can host many different mines, many different shapes and sizes and mineralization styles. And so we're really only at the cusp of what could be a very tremendous discovery in the landscape. And thankfully for us, there's a lot of other companies in our midst, around us, and our neighbors that have also quite compelling things. And I think overall, in the storyboard that is discovery in Newfoundland, gold discovery in Newfoundland, we're really just at the start, because now, thankfully, a lot of investors are starting to recognize that there is really a bottomless pit of potential here, and all somebody has to do is look. One of the interesting things that we talk about with the style of mineralization that we get here in Newfoundland is that a lot of the gold is similar to what we see at Fosterville and Swan Zone. We have to remember, this was one of the most profitable mines, gold mines the world's ever seen. It was spitting out an incredible amount of free cash flow because it had incredible grade. And grade is really, really important for the resilience and the profitability of a mine. We know that grade is often variable, and whether you go to Fosterville or whether you go to Red Lake or any other orogenic camp, when you're into high-grade systems, there's a huge amount of nuggets. Sometimes you get these treasure boxes or jewelry boxes. In the case of Fosterville and the Swan Zone, they had a really big, long one. And the reason why this was allowed to, or this formed, this system at Fosterville, is because of it's an epizonal style deposit. And what the epizonal means is that it's an orogenic deposit. When those gold-bearing fluids came up from super deep, they got emplaced they emplaced their gold really, really shallow, close to surface, in brittle rock regimes. And pressure and temperature drops off a cliff as these hot, boiling gold-bearing fluids migrated up, and all of a sudden, bang, like an explosion, they pop, they drop all of their gold in these spectacular high-grade deposits. And so most of the time when we look at orogenic belts around the world, these types of zones, these epizonal horizons, have been eroded off. And so if we look in other Archean type of gold environments like Timmins and Kirkland Lake and Red Lake, we're now looking in the mesozonal horizon, something a little deeper. That epizonal part scraped off it gone a long time ago. Here we have it preserved. And so that's really crazy. And at Fosterville, they had it too. So one of the interesting things when we look at our rocks versus the Fosterville rocks, we see the same mineralogy. We see the same types of vein textures. We see a lot of the bizarre accessory minerals we're getting. Vugginess. Dr. Quinton Henne came to our project, had a look at our core, and one of the first things he noticed was one of the features that had us all scratching our heads was that our quartz veins were full of these little pits and cavities and vugs. And so if you look at our core versus on the left and Fosterville's core side by side on the right, you can see the very same little pits and cavities and vugs. Again, a telltale sign that we're in this epizonal type of regime. And over here on the right, we get this fine-grained, beautiful, disseminated visible gold. And we have it, and they have it at Fosterville. So there's a lot of chips stacking up to create this analog between the Bendigo rocks, the Victoria Goldfields in Australia, and the Central Gold Belt in Newfoundland. The rocks are the same age. The rocks are the same types of rocks. We get a lot of the same accessory, bizarre minerals. And we get a lot of the same veining textures and stuff. And now, thanks to our discovery, we're seeing a lot of the same grades that we can get in these treasure boxes, much like they see over in treasure boxes in their belt. So if anything's the same, if all these other things are the same, it means that there's a lot of gold left to be found in the entirety of Newfoundland. We're very excited to play a role in discovering what we've discovered and hopefully more, and attracting other companies to do the same, and attract more investors into this space to basically take a chance with us in peeking under the lid of Newfoundland and seeing really what could be below. So thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak at the conference. I hope everybody enjoys what they see and all of the other talks from the other people. And so thank you very, very much.